Hello, my friends. We're going to start again. Oh yes, we're going to start again. Are you ready? Excellent. I love you. You gave a primal scream. Would you like? Well, how many of you were here for the last show? Okay, I'm going to skip all the announcements then. You know the drill, right? Silent auction, water. Please buy our stuff. It's a plea. It's a plea. Independent artists, of course, do depend on the sale of our resources to help us feed our kids and pay our mortgages. So if you and Christmas is just right around the corner. So let's see. Our first teller is a. Sorry, let me just pull myself together. Our first teller, real name is William, and his second name starts with an H. Can anyone guess who that might be? The wallet. The wallet. Yes, yes. It's Bill Harley. Oh, and we have a lost phone. If anyone has found it, please give it to me. Okay, my friends. Actually, I want to really be the wind beneath his wings. So, when my kids were really little, they had a favorite storyteller, and it was this man. Because when my kids were really little, we went through a really tough time. We had some really bad luck. And after dinner, we would pull up around our cassette player, and the three of us would listen to his stories, and it made us laugh. And we did that night after night after night after night after night until we found a way to laugh again, just in general. And so he's so much more than a 2-time Grammy winner. I mean, I think of him as just an ambassador of hope and understanding and joy. It's, of course, Bill Harley. So.
Hey, y'all. I'm looking at the clock. To see what time it is. It's so nice to be here. I just said to somebody, it's so nice to see here. I said, I feel like the storytellers got let out of jail. That's what it feels like to me. And I was doing a workshop yesterday, and I quoted this apocryphal story by Gregory Bateson, who's talking about how the human mind works. And he said these two guys developed a computer that worked like the human mind, and then they tested it by asking it the question, how does a human mind work? And the computer responded, that reminds me of a story. And I have been listening to people all last night and this morning, and every time I think I know what I'm going to do, one of these idiots tells a story, and I go, oh, that reminds me, I want to tell this. So I actually am not quite sure what I'm doing yet, but you're going to try with this. Right? Okay, this is a song I wrote, let me plug in here. The coffee was probably okay to do, but the red eye with the espresso shot was probably a bad idea. I was doing a songwriting workshop with a bunch of 5th graders in some classroom somewhere, and we brainstorm possible song titles, and then we vote on it, and then we write a song based on that title. So I was brainstorming, all these kids were suggesting things, because I said so. That was someone, a kid says, that's a good title for a song, But someone said, oh, I got one. I said, what? He said, my dog ate my homework. And everybody said, yeah. And I said, no. They said, why not? I said, no, not that one. They said, why? I said, because every time I do this workshop, someone says my dog ate my homework. It's no longer interesting. And they said, what do you mean? I said, there has to be, a good story has reversal in it. Every good story has a reversal. When the world spins and the world that you think is there is suddenly gone and you see the world anew. And they said, what are you talking about? I said, you have to turn it on its head. And so I wrote this song to show them and I got halfway through and realized it was kind of like it had this Springsteen feel to it. So I thought I'd better try to, because the difference between me and the boss is like, all right.
Millimeter.
You say, pass your homework up, and that's just what I like to do. I know you've seen it all before, but I've got something really new. Some kid says theirs got lost. Some kid says their pencil broke. I've got one you haven't heard. I promise you that it's no joke. My homework ate my dog. Now he's gone and I'm so sad. One bite and he was done. The sweetest pet I ever had. Who knew homework could do that? I swear to you it's true that my homework ate my dog. I did it right when I got home. I checked the paper once, and then my dog came in and saw it there. It sniffed the paper once, and then the homework opened up its mouth. Giant teeth both north and south. It took a bite, then it swallowed. The head went first, the tail just followed. My homework ate my dog. I watched it as it chewed and slurped down the hatch old Rover went. Then it gave a great big burp. It was enough to see that homework sure was me. My homework ate my dog. I know you wanna call my home, see if it's all true, but that won't really help at all. It ain't my parents too. I dialed the cops, dialed 911. They came too late, the damage done. They took my homework right away. It broke the law, it had to pay. My homework didn't shed a tear. They sentenced it to 20 years. Now my homework rots in jail. See, I don't have it, please don't fail me. My homework ate my dog. Now he's gone, I'm really grieving. By how you look at me, I see that you are not believing. I know it's kind of gory, still it's a good story. My homework ate my homework ate my homework ate my dog. Now this is going to be really interesting to see what happens next, because even I don't know. Well, let's try this one. Here's a new piece. Make a little more guitar and monitor since I'm done with my pounding for the minute. No problem, no problem, that's what some folks say. No problem, I can fix that. make your problems go away. But when someone says no problem, is it a blessing or a curse? It could get better, it might get worse. I was lying in my bed and I was bored, staring at the crack on my ceiling, which reminded me of the map of the Oregon Trail in 4th grade. I was bored and feeling sorry for myself on a Saturday afternoon. My parents weren't there, neither was my older or younger brother. I don't know where they were, but they can't be there for this to happen, so they were gone. I don't mean to say that I was by myself. I had a babysitter, my grandmother. I kind of resented having a babysitter. As a 9-year-old, I wasn't a baby and I didn't like to be sat on. But I must say that my grandmother was pretty good as far as babysitters go. She was kind of a laissez-faire babysitter. She just kind of let me do what I want, and every once in a while she'd say, "Billy, what are you doing?" And I say, "Nothing." She'd say, "All right," and then she'd go back to watching The Days of Our Lives and As the World Turns and General Hospital. So I could pretty much do anything I wanted as long as I didn't burn down the house, which I did not do in this story. But I was feeling kind of bad for myself, staring at the ceiling, when I heard 2 voices calling out across the neighborhood, "Hey, Bill! Did you lose your wallet?" That's not what they said. I looked out the window in my bedroom. I could see them, 2 of my friends, my friend Glenn, my pal Sally, standing at the bottom of the driveway. We didn't knock on people's doors at our house. We just stood and yelled. Why would we talk to the grown-ups? Wait for the kids to come outside. "Hey, Bill, you home?" I said, "I'll be right out." And they walked up the driveway. We met on the front steps. They said, "What's up?" I said, "I got a problem." They said, "What's your problem?" I said, "I'm bored." They said, "You're bored? Why are you bored?" I said, "I've been thinking about this. The reason children are bored is children would not be bored if you would give them $100 in the car keys, then I wouldn't be bored." Which is still kind of true. And Glenn said, "No problem, no problem. I know what to do. No problem, no problem. I can fix that for you." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah. I know how we're going to make $100. I said, $100? I've never seen $100. How are we going to make $100? And he said, "We're going to sell fresh squeezed lemonade." And Sally, who was a resident scientist and mathematician, said, $100 a lemonade. Let me see, if we sell lemonade for 10 cents a glass, that means we need to sell, let me see, that'll be 1,000 glasses of lemonade. 10,000, let me see, that's 10,000, that's 92 gallons of lemonade we need to make. And I said, "Well, I got a problem with that." They said, "What?" I said, "I have a pitcher that does not hold 92 gallons. And Glenn said, "No problem, no problem. I know what to do." I said, "What?" He said, "We're going to make it in your bathtub." Sally said, "That is an excellent idea." She said, "Immediately, but according to that, we're going to make 1,000 glasses of lemonade and 12 ounces in each glass. We're going to need 1,000 lemons, 35-pound bags of sugar." Glenn said, "Do you have any money?" I said, "No, that was where the problem started. I don't have any money." I said, "Do your parents have any money?" I said, "They're not here and they wouldn't give it to me." They said, "Well, what about your brothers?" I said, "My brother has a paper route. He keeps all the money in his drawer." They said, "Go get it." I said, "That would be stealing." Glenn said, "No, Bill, this is an investment. The first thing we'll do when we make money is put it back in his drawer with a slight interest. He'll never know the difference. Go get it." I said, "Oh," so I did. My grandmother called up the steps, "Billy, what are you doing?" And I said, "Nothing." And she said, "All right." Went back to watching General Hospital, Days of Our Lives, and As the World Turns. So Glenn and Sally and I, we got my wagon, we pulled it down the street, across the highway, into the supermarket where we bought 1,000 lemons and 35-pound bags of lemonade. Sugar, excuse me. I told you it was new. We pulled it down the highway, across the street, down our street. Sally said, wait a minute. She ran into our house. She said, be ready to run. She emerged from her house 30 seconds later holding a contraption. We said, what is it? She said, it's a Sunbeam electric juice squeezer. Let's go. We carried it back into our house. 1,000 lemons, 35-pound bags of sugar, and the Sunbeam juice squeezer. My grandmother said, what are you doing? And I said, nothing. Glenn said, you have a very trusting grandmother. So we carried all that equipment back up into the bathroom, the boys' bathroom, not the adult bathroom. There were 2 bathrooms in our house. None of us, me or my brothers, were allowed to go into the adult bathroom, my parents' bathroom. This was the boys' bathroom. As Don White says, one of his friends says, there's 3 boys, just paint the bathroom yellow and don't worry about it. So we squeezed in there. It was a small bathroom. We'd never been able to do this in the era of social distancing. We got inside. Sally said, we've got a problem. I said, what? She said, how are we going to cut these lemons? We need sharp knives. We need a knife for each one of us. And I said, no problem, no problem. I know what to do. She said, what? I said, my parents have a set of 6 knives that they hardly ever use. They only use it on Christmas, Thanksgiving, and Easter. It's these sharp steak knives that are in the hutch in the dining room. They said, go get them. So I did. I pulled up that box of steak knives. We started to cut them on the bathroom vanity. I said, there's a problem. We're cutting up the bathroom vanity. 6 weeks from now, my mother might come in this bathroom and see something has happened. Glenn said, no problem. The tile on the floor is hard. We can cut it there. So we got down on our hands and knees. 3 9-year-old children cutting 1,000 lemons into 2,000 half lemons. Sally said, there's a problem. I said, what? She said, we're wasting all this lemon juice on the floor. Glenn said, do you have a sponge? I said, there's one right under here in the bathroom. Vanity. We use it. Said, just soak it up. So we soaked it up with the sponge, and Sally said, might as well put it in the bathroom. Don't want the bathtub. We don't want to waste it. So we got 1,000 lemons cut into 2,000 half lemons, and we turned on that Sunbeam electric juice squeezer, and it worked like a charm. We poured all that lemon juice into the tub, and we began to open the 35-pound bags of sugar and pour it into the tub. When that was in there, we turned on the water, watched it fill up. Glenn said, that's enough. I said, how do you know? He said, it's an estimate, a scientific term. And I said, we got a problem. They said, what? I said, usually when I make lemonade, I stir it up with a big wooden spoon, but I don't have a big wooden spoon, nor even a canoe paddle with which I can stir this. And Sally said, no problem, no problem. I know what to do. No problem, no problem. I think that you do too. We said, what? She said, are we not children? We are children. Have we never climbed into a tub before? We have climbed into a tub. Are we not human wave agitators? The human wave agitator! How could we have forgotten? Every child that climbs into a tub is a human wave agitator. Your parent fills up the bathtub, you climb in the tub, and there's a little toy boat that you're playing with, there's a little plastic whale that you're playing with, and then there's an action figure that has no business being in the tub. And you climb in there, you're playing with them, but then you begin to get bored. And you don't know what to do, so you begin to slide back and forth against the bottom of the tub. Pretty soon, waves begin to form, crests and troughs, increasing in frequency and amplitude until they begin to splash against the back and the front. And then the boats are capsizing. Oh, Captain, my Captain! The whales are breaching. The action figures are drowning. Luke, I am your boo. And the water splashes over the side, and the grown-up comes in and says, what are you doing? But they should have known when they put a child in the bathtub, they would become a human wave agitator. Bill, you can be the human wave agitator. But Sally said, there is a problem. This is a family store. You can't just take your clothes off with both of us standing here. It would be indecent. I said, no problem. No problem. I said, I'll just put on my swimsuit. They said, that sounds good. Glenn said, have you taken a bath lately? I said, once a week. So I put on my swimsuit and I climbed into the bathtub. They said, agitate, Bill, agitate. I began to slide back and forth. Lemon juice began to mix with the water and the sugar. The boats began to capsize. Oh, Captain, my Captain, the whales breach. Oh, the action figures drowned. Luke, I am your Captain. Oh. My grandmother called up the stairs, Bill, what are you doing? I said, nothing. Glenn says, I love your grandmother. We thought it was about mixing. Glenn said, you know, we got a problem here. I think we need to make some more money. This needs to be more interesting. I said, what? I was wondering if we could change colors. And Sally said, I know what to do. She ran down in the kitchen and she came back with a little box of 5 brightly colored bottles. And she said, let's make it more yellow. And she poured the whole bottle of food coloring in. And they said, agitate, Bill, agitate. And it became this beautiful, bright, shining yellow. And Glenn said it would be more interesting if you made it another color. She said, I'm a scientist, watch this. And she poured in the bottle of blue. And they said, agitate, it became bright green. And I said, I wish it was purple. Purple lemonade would be value-added lemonade. And then she said, I'll put in the red. And she put in the red. And there was a slight miscalculation because red and yellow and blue make black. Len said, now we have freshly squeezed human agitated black lemonade. This must be worth 20 cents a cup. They said, you can climb out, Bill. And they watched in mute admiration as I climbed out and looked at the strange gray translucence of my skin. They said, we're all done. I said, no, we're not. We have a problem. They said, what's the problem? I said, we have 92 gallons of freshly squeezed, human agitated, value-added black lemonade here in the bathtub, but we have to sell it on the street. I don't have a pitcher that holds 92 gallons of lemonade. What are we gonna do? And Sally said, no problem, no problem. I know what to do. I said, what? She said, do you have a hose? I said, yes. She said, do you have more than one section? I said, we have 6 sections of hose. She said, what we're going to do is we're going to hook them up all together, stick one end of the bathtub, run it down the hallway, down the steps, through the living room, out the front door, all the way down to the street, and then we'll just dispense the lemonade from there. We said, that's genius. She said, go get the hose. So I did. Pretty soon we'd hooked them up all together. We stuck one end in the bathtub. Ran it down the hallway, through the living room, out the door. My grandmother said, what are you doing? We said, nothing. Glenn said, do you think your grandmother could adopt me? We got a table. Sally said, what are we going to serve them in? Glenn said, if we could find something to serve them in, maybe we could fancy, we could make we charge 25 cents for the lemonade. I said, no problem. My parents have some glasses that they hardly ever use. What kind of glasses? I said, I don't know. They use the word Waterford. There's 6 of them. Go get them. So I did. We brought down the Waterford crystal. We set it up on the card table. We made a sign that said, today only, freshly squeezed, human agitated, value-added black lemonade, 25 cents a glass. And we lived in one of those baby boom neighborhoods, man. This is the only true thing I'm telling you today. There were 40 kids within about 100 yards of that house. And as soon as we put that sign up, it was like a black hole with an event horizon. They all began to gather, and they saw the sign, and they said, how do you make freshly squeezed, human agitated black lemonade? And we said 92 gallons at a time. First kid put his quarter, we put it in the Maxwell House coffee can. Glenn went down the line collecting 25 cents at a time. We picked up the hose, we held it up to the cup and nothing happened. I said, something's wrong, it's not coming out. Sally said, no problem, no problem, I know what to do. I said, what? She said, we need to create a vacuum. I said, how do we do that? She said, do you not have something in your house that has the word vacuum in it? And I said, you mean a vacuum cleaner? She said, do you have one? I said, do we have one? We have one. My mother has a brand new vacuum cleaner that she loves. She stands by the door when we come in the door and she just sucks half of our being into it before we walk into the house. It's called a Deluxe Electrolux. They say, go get it. And so I did. About 75 feet of extension cord, ran it down the driveway, hooked it up, the Deluxe Electrolux vacuum cleaner. Glenn said, turn it on. We turned it on. And I want to tell you, man, that thing worked like a charm. We hooked it up to the end of the hose, and pretty soon we heard a gurgling. Coursing down the hose came 92 gallons of freshly squeezed, human agitated, value-added black lemonade. We said, here it comes, here it comes. And it came into the vacuum cleaner. And before we knew it, it came spewing out the other end. I was holding onto the vacuum cleaner, spraying it across the neighborhood. Children were screaming, dropping Waterford crystal, getting sprayed, turning an unusually translucent color of gray, running away. And then there was a huge pop and smoke came out of the Electrolux and it gurgled to a stop, and my grandmother called out the door, Billy, something's wrong. And I ran up into the house and opened the door to find my grandmother standing in the middle of the living room. She said, something's wrong with the television. The tube had exploded. There was a sticky, slick, freshly squeezed, human agitated black lemonade coursing down the stairways into the living room. The ceiling beneath the bathroom was dripping onto the couch. She said, what did you do? And I said, nothing. And she said, okay. And I went back outside. And there were my two friends, my friend Glenn and my pal Sally. They were looking down at the deceased Electrolux vacuum cleaner, the shattered Waterford crystal, the puddles of freshly squeezed, human agitated black lemonade. I said, this is horrible. This didn't solve any of my problems. And Glenn said, what are you talking about? I said, look, I destroyed my house. I don't even have any money. He said, as far as I'm concerned, we solved your problem. I said, no, you didn't. He said, Bill, you said your problem was being bored. Have you been bored for the past 3.5 hours? And I saw the wisdom in that. I said, I suppose I haven't. And it was just at that point that my parents pulled into the driveway. And I said, I have a problem. And my friend said, no problem, no problem. We know what to do. We hear our mothers calling. And they left. And that's when my problems started. No problem, no problem. I know what to do. No problem, no problem. I'm happy helping you. When someone says no problem, it's a blessing and a curse. It could be trouble. Might get worse. I started thinking about that saying, no problem, when I was, a number of years ago, I was in, after the Bosnian War, I was trying to figure out, like, what the heck happened there, you know? I got really interested in, I'm kind of obsessed with it, and so I went to Bosnia, and I went to Sarajevo, and I met a lot of people. There was a newspaper in Sarajevo called Oslobođenja, and they were committed when Sarajevo was under siege to being to print this multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-religious paper through the war, and they did every day. And the Serbs that had surrounded the city, the first thing they did was destroy the library. Think about that. And the second thing they did was destroy the newspaper, and so they moved underground. And when I was still there, the whole country was still in post-traumatic shock, which it is even to this day. And I couldn't find my way around, and everywhere I went, I asked for directions, and every person said to me, "No problem." And I just got more and more lost. I just thought about that all the time. So I had something, let me see, how we doing? Okay, I think I can do this. A couple years ago, I drove across the country as a field trip, research for a book. I had a book just come out this fall. It took some 7 years to write, but it's called Now You Say Yes, and it's about a 15-year-old girl in Los Angeles who drives all the way across the country. Her mother's died, and she was in a foster care system, and she's afraid that she's going to get put back into the foster care system with her 9-year-old autistic brother. And so she convinces her brother to get in the car, even though she's 15, and they drive across the country to Lynn, Massachusetts in the hopes of finding their estranged grandmother. So I drove across the country for that. And I got to Indiana, where I grew up. And when I got to Richmond, Indiana, where my son went to college, he went to Earlham College, I took a left and I went north to Fountain City, Indiana. In Fountain City, Indiana, it was the town that my dad grew up in. I was born in Greenville, Ohio, which was just across the state line. I knew where my father had told me where his house was, and so I wanted to take a look at it. My father lived a really hard scrabble life. His dad was a superintendent of schools, and then he went back to med school, and 2 years after he got out of med school, he died of a heart attack. And his mom moved them back into Fountain City, and they didn't have any money. And then my dad, because my grandmother was falling apart, got shunted from one part of the family to another. And never really recovered from that, to my mind. But I got there, and I was looking at this little, he called it a workman's cottage that he grew up in. And right next to it was the Levi Coffin House. And I'd heard of Levi Coffin, but I didn't realize he was from Fountain City, Indiana. So I went on the tour. Levi Coffin is called the Grand Station Master of the Underground Railroad. And they said that over 3,200, he helped over 3,200 people, enslaved people, get to freedom, and no one was ever caught under his watch. And he had moved there. He was a Quaker, and I was kind of interested in that because when I was in high school, I started to go to Quaker meetings. I was trying to figure out what I was going to do about the Vietnam War when I had to register for the draft, and I didn't feel right about it. And I eventually registered to be a conscientious objector. And so when I started to go to Quaker meeting, and it made sense to me. And both of my parents were very ambivalent about this. They were ambivalent about the war, but they were also ambivalent about what I was doing. But my grandmother, when I told her I was going, she said, "You know, Bill, I think there might be some Quakers in our family. I think they might have come from North Carolina in the 1820s. So I kind of had that in the back of my mind, and I went on this tour. I was the only one there in the house, and there were all these secret panels, these secret rooms where people would be let in, and they would lead them in the back door. And one day they told me there was a knock on the door at night, and they opened up, and they said, "We have your cargo." And they opened up the false bottom of the wagon, and 13 people climbed out and came into that house. And Harriet Tubman stood there in the kitchen, and Frederick Douglass stood there in the kitchen, and William Lloyd Garrison stood in that kitchen. And I could kind of feel the history. Sometimes we feel that. And I said to the tour guides, "You know, my dad grew up next door." And they said, "What was his name?" And I said, "His name was Harley." And they said, "We don't know of any Harleys." I said, "But my grandmother's name, and she thinks there might have been some Quakers in our family, was Moat." And the woman said, "Moat?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Do you see this picture a Levi coffin. I said, yeah, that was drawn by Marcus Mote. Marcus Mote was a Quaker artist, which is a little bit of an oxymoron. And the Motes came up with the coffins from North Carolina in the 1820s to leave a slave state to come to a free state. And it was one of those moments when I literally started shaking, and I knew that somehow I was part of that, and somehow it explained to me a lot of the things that I was wrestling with. We talk about epigenesis, epigenetic behavior, that actually trauma gets passed on now genetically. And I wondered to myself, is it possible that care and honesty and courage gets passed on in DNA? And suddenly I felt this lifeline back to this group of people who had been so brave and stood up in the face of all this resistance to care for somebody else. And I just started shaking in the sense that I knew, if I didn't know it by fact and figure, I knew in my soul that that was right. And suddenly I had a way of looking at myself and my family that I had never had before. And that made a huge difference to me. But here's something else. 50 years later, the Mote family played a large part in the resurgence of the Ku Klux Klan in eastern Indiana. In the 1920s, 60% of the politicians in Indiana belonged to the Ku Klux Klan. They were trying to make it legitimate. So here we are. Both of those things are true. Every family has violence in it. Every family has hatred in it. Every family in it has bigotry. But on the other side, there are other stories of the family. And we talk about heritage all the time now. People are defending their actions, saying, but this is our heritage. But heritage is something that we decide what we're going to honor. It's up to us to decide what to honor. Which wolf are you going to feed? And I think about that. In the country where I live, there are many colors, many shades and many hues, many spaces in between. Like a rainbow braid of light, each strand bound around the others. Colors blend and stand alone in the country where I live. In the country where I live, there are many voices, many stories, many words, many ways to name the world. Voices rise and then they fall, they divide and come together. Many voices, many songs in the country where I live. Here in my heart, here in my dreams, until my country comes to be. In the country where I live, there are many gardens where the seeds of life are sown in the hope that they might grow, where the smallest flower blooms, finds its place among the others. There are gardens filled with hope in the country where I live. There are gardens filled with hope in the country where I live. Thanks for bearing with me. It's been really nice to spend some time with you guys. Thanks a lot.
The heart has an unknown capacity to love, doesn't it? So our next teller has a richness that he brings to us historically, spiritually, physically, and musically. So I won't keep you waiting, but I will keep you waiting for just a second.
Keep them waiting for a minute. Okay, now you don't have to keep them waiting.
Okay, great. I was going to tell you a bad joke. You still want to hear it?
Yes.
Okay. What do you call a gold rush prostitute?
Don't know.
Westward ho!
Oh.
Oh, I should have saved that for Naughty Dance. Which I hope you bought your ticket for. Anyway, I was just so moved by that beautiful set, and I know we're going to be moved even more when he returns. You know what I was thinking? I was thinking the other day. I was thinking about I had this surrogate family when I was in college, and they were the Terwilligers, and the Terwilligers had they had gigantic heads, and they smacked their lips when they ate, and they yelled, and they just were the most magnificent people. They were just so alive. And as I got older, they got older too, and I always stayed really, really close to them. They just were like surrogate parents to me. And one time, Susie, their daughter, asked me to take them to the doctors, and I said, yeah, sure. And the whole time, Bill was talking, and Betty was in the back seat. And when we got out, how much time do I have? A little bit more. And so, and when they got out, Betty says to me, I couldn't hear a word he said, but I know he's wrong. And they lived together until they were both well into their 90s, and I think they were married something like 75 years. 75 years. And during their last weeks, you could see them sitting in the corner like little lovebirds, just kind of leaning into love. And that's what our next storyteller does too. He just helps us all lean into love, no matter what's happening, no matter what we look like or where we come from. We just lean into love. So let's go ahead and put our hands together for Reverend Robert Jones.
Thank you so much, Reggie. What a wonderful and gracious and inventive introduction that was. It's like I realized when I saw Bill, and let's have another round of applause for Brother Bill Harley. We don't get to see each other very often, and when we get to see each other, we start inspiring one another. And I saw that he started his shut-off with the harmonica, with the Bob Dylan torture device. And I myself thought, you know what, I want to start off myself with the Bob Dylan torture device. Except, of course, my grounding is not in cats like Bob Dylan or Bruce Springsteen, but guys like Sonny Terry and Big Joe and Sonny Boy Williamson. Because my grandmother introduced me to the blues at an early age. I sat at her knee and learned the blues. Not because she was playing, because she had it on the Magnavox radio. And that's what I learned. Folks like Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee. My grandmother came from Connecticut County, Alabama, which everything down south was good. Cornbread was good. Collard greens good, fried chicken good, and of course the blues were good. And so she introduced me to these folks. He brought home a record one day. Young folks, you don't know what records are. Records are those big black compact discs that you can actually see them going around. And then they came in something called liner notes, so you could sit there and learn as you listened. And that's what I did. I learned about a guy named Sonny Terry, who was a blind harmonica player. A guy named Bronny McGee, who was a guy who had one leg shorter than the other because of something called polio. And they played together, worked together for over 40 years, couldn't stand each other, but it did not matter. It was almost like a bad marriage. But they got on just fine. He said, I can't see and you can't run, so we need each other. And they came up with great songs like Hooray, Hooray, This Woman Is Killing Me. And this song my grandmother played over and over again, called Gone But Not Forgotten. The blues you play when you're too cheap to get a band. My baby and me, we never used to fight. Used to love, hug and kiss at night. Came home one morning and she had gone away. Ever since she went away, Lord, no, my heart does nothing but break. Her address is unknown, Lord. Blues is here to stay. She gone but not forgotten. Tell you the reason why. She had the kind of love that would satisfy. Like the ocean rolling that comes in with the tide. Well, I hope, Lord, I hope there comes a day she let her love roll by my way and explain to me herself the reason why she left. Play the blues. Tell you the reason why. She had the kind of love that would satisfy. She had love like the ocean rolling that comes in with the tide. Well, I hope, Lord, I hope there comes a day she let her love roll by my way and explain to me herself the reason why she left. Thank you so much. Now, I'm going to tell you, my grandmother gave me far more than just the blues. She gave me stories about our family, about growing up. She came from Alabama. She came from Evergreen, Alabama, which is in Connecticut County, which is down by the Gulf of Mexico. And then, I've been playing a long time. I had, like I told folks, you know, I didn't have much of a repertoire when I first started playing professionally, so I'd tell people stories about the songs I was singing, and that stretched the set out, and it got me through a long time. And then I started learning more and more songs, and folks said, keep the stories in because we like them. Well, somebody must have liked them a lot because they told somebody about me at the National Storytelling Festival. And one year when my friend Roy Bookbinder, and I consider him a mentor, could not make it, he decided to recommend me to the folks at the National. And so I sort of started my real storytelling career, although I've been telling stories a long time. I started at the National. I started playing baseball at the World Series. It was great. And I walked up the hill, and the first voice I saw, the first person I saw, was this little bitty lady. And she was standing there. She was like maybe 89 years old, and she didn't have a cane. She didn't have a walker. She was just standing there. Had a little straw hat, little purple dress, little orange and black shoes. And I thought somebody should help her with her shoes. But no, that was Miss Catherine Wyndham. And she loved, those were her Auburn shoes. She loved her Auburn Tigers. In fact, and a matter of fact, when Auburn won the national championship, she just figured she'd seen it all and went on up to glory. I love Miss Catherine because she was telling these stories about Selma, Alabama. And I was like, this is not the Alabama that I grew up in Detroit thinking was Alabama. It was a beautiful place in Miss Catherine's world, and she talked about it, and she talked about it with great fondness and love. And I thought about the Alabama my grandmother talked about. Now, she loved Alabama too, but in a different kind of way. As a black woman growing up in Connecticut County, she told me about my great-grandfather. My great-grandfather's name was Will Cunningham. And Will lived in a different time. No matter how things are now, I think about the life he lived and the place and experiences he had. And I was listening to Pastor Joseph Lowry one day, great civil rights leader, great black preacher, who was giving an address on Martin Luther King Day, and he was talking about the 50th anniversary of the March on Selma. And this young man stood up and said, Pastor Lowry, that's all fine and good. I'm glad y'all did what y'all did when y'all crossed that Pettus Bridge and everything. And, and I thought, y'all was probably thinking y'all was gonna create lasting change, but the problem is we still got problems in this country, man. We got problems with unemployment, we got problems with police brutality, we got problems with an unfair education system, we got problems, because they run down this litany of problems. And then Pastor Lowry looked at him like old black preachers do and said, sir, I respect what you say, but anybody who thinks that things now is as bad as they was then wasn't around then. My great-grandfather was around then. So when Miss Catherine told me I got to tell my family's story, I went home and wrote this. County, Alabama, 1925. Will Cunningham rode into town to get his week's supplies. Now, Will was a black man who'd fought in World War I, and he faced smoke and powder, but he never chose to run. He had a favorite scripture whenever times got mean. It was 2 Kings chapter 6, around verse 17. It had helped him back in France when he was far from home, saying, Lord, open up our eyes to see we do not stand alone. Cause he did not pick his battles and he never chose his friends. When he got up in the morning, didn't know how the day would end. But there were angels all around him and chariots on the wind. And he who stood with him were more than those who rode with them. Now, Will was my great-grandfather, and he never learned to bow. When other black men would step aside, Will never figured how. He worked for Boss Mac Binion, who was a hard and wealthy man, cause everywhere you were standing, you were on Mac Binion's land. Mac Binion was a white man, but all white men ain't the same, and some would curse you and abuse you and call you out your name. Well, that's the kind Will met that morning when he stepped into the store. Just a ball of hate and evil, and very little more. But he did not pick his battles, and he never chose his friends. When he got up in the morning, didn't know how the day would end. But there were angels all around him, and chariots on the wind. And those who stood with him were more than those who rode with him. When Will Cunningham met evil, he looked evil in the face. Evil says, this is the kind of nigger you gotta put back in his place. So he slapped my great-grandfather and teach him by degrees. But Will answered him with a straight right hand and knocked evil to his knees. It was still Connecticut County in 1925, and you couldn't whoop a white man if you wanted to stay alive. So Will got back on that wagon and he headed out for home. He didn't want Henrietta and the babies to meet the storm alone. But he did not pick his battles and he never chose his friends. When he got up in the morning, didn't know how the day would end. But there were angels all around him and chariots on the wind. And those who stood with him were more than those who rode with them. Well, evil got his mob together and they passed around the cup. They said along about midnight we'll go string that up. And evil had the rifles and evil had the rope. Will just had a shotgun, but he didn't have much hope. Then Boss McBinion showed up with his pistol in his hand. He said, I heard y'all gonna try to lynch my hardest working man. Now I don't know who you worthless trash think you come to kill, but I'm glad to shoot the man who lays a hand on my man Will. And one by one they dropped their guns and went into the night. Will lived to see another day. He'd won a hopeless fight. And the word of God from World War I and saved him once again. Cause he could not pick his battles and he did not choose his friends. Will died in a nursing home at the age of 91. And standing at that funeral home was the one who wrote this song. And I tell this old man's story just to pass along, that even when you're by yourself, you never stand alone. You can't always pick your battles or always choose your friends. When you get up in the morning, don't know how the day will end. But there are angels all around us, chariots on the wind. And those who stand with us are more than those who ride with them. Connecticut County, Alabama, 1925. Will Cunningham rode into town to get his week's supplies. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Well, I come from Detroit. I come boldly and unapologetically from the Motor City. And whenever I'm in a different part of the country, people always ask me, how is Detroit? Because they've seen so much bad press about Detroit. They've seen so many terrible things about Detroit. How is Detroit? And I said, Detroit's fine. And I hear it's on the rise. I said, yeah, it is on the rise. It's good. It's almost like Detroit was on life support. Clear. But it's like, no, I love the city. This is the place I was born in. And I love the music. I love a lot of stuff. I love my wife and my children, my grandchildren. And I love what we get to do and who we get to do it in front of. It's wonderful. And the instruments that we play become really personal. After a while, they become sort of, I won't say symbols of power, but you spend a lot of time sweating on these instruments and they become personalized, right? So I wanted to write this song about my love of stories, my love of Detroit, and my love for this weird looking guitar. I was looking at that young lady who was doing that great thing about Joni Mitchell, and this guy was like tuning his guitars and giving them to her. I wish I had that guy right now. Okay. Let's see. Yeah. It's amazing. Live performance. Stuff just fly out your head. Stuff that you wrote. Fly out your head. Crazy. Let's see. And you know what? I learned that from Reggie. Got it. This old house was built on Trumbull Street back in 1910 when the whole world worked for Henry Ford. He was the poor man's friend. And Detroit money built it but it outlived the fame of that city that put the world on wheels and gave Motown its name. But when you come from Detroit, you have to know, my friend, that you cannot surrender and you cannot give in. And even when you're broken and you're almost at the end, know that if you save the pieces, you will live again. Milton Smith, he lived in this old house for almost 60 years. And it had its share of singing, and it had its share of tears. Through the Coolies and Hernandezes, time would take its toll. 2012, they took her down, 102 years old. But when you come from Detroit, you have to know, my friend, that you cannot surrender, Lord, and you dare not give in. And even when you're broken and you're almost at the end, know that if you save the pieces, you will live again. I'm just a Detroit storyteller, but I travel near and far. And the Detroit storyteller wants to play Detroit guitar. So I met a builder named Zimnicki, a man of awesome skills. Arch tops, flat tops, ukuleles, ain't nothing he can't build. He said, I got something I want to show you, and I think it's kind of sweet. See, I built this from this old house that used to stand on Trumbull Street. I used maple from the floorboard and walnut from the shelf. Top is from a ceiling joist that I cut and cleaned myself. Now I play a Detroit guitar made of 100-year-old wood, and I got to tell you, she sings mighty good. Cause when you come from Detroit, you have to know, my friend, you cannot surrender, Lord, and you dare not give in. And even when you're broken and you're almost at the end, know that if you save the pieces, you will sing again. Know that if you save the pieces, you will sing again. Good. Thanks so much. So, thank you. This guitar has these weird pinstripes, right? And the reason it has pinstripes is not because I'm from Detroit and I'm styling, but it's because these planks are maple floorboards from that house 100 years ago. And the dark wood is walnut from the shelves, and the top wood, which has started to really age and deepen in color in a weird way. It's got like almost a lightning bolt coming up the top. That's from a ceiling joist of Douglas fir. And if you look in the headstock, you'll see a representation of the house, and at the 12th fret it says 1910. So no matter where I'm playing, if I'm playing this, I'm playing Detroit. But wait, there's more. I want you to make my... And I didn't know that I was into ukuleles until later in life. It's really hard to tell folks what I play the blues ukulele. They look at you like you're crazy. But then I realized that before Blind Lemon Jefferson, there was no blues guitar. Before Sonny Boy Williamson, there was no blues harmonica. And so why not blues ukulele? In the Mississippi Delta, this song called Baby Please Don't Go. That's the blues. You can't sing the blues with just mild conviction. Can't be like, baby please don't go. Cause she gonna leave, man. Gotta put some, baby please don't go. Baby please don't go. Baby please don't go back to New Orleans. You know I love you so. Got me way down here. Got me way down here. Got me way down here, down in Rolling Fork. Treat me like a dog, baby, please don't go. Got me out in Ojai. Got me out in Ojai. When I think about you, baby, in Ojai, you know that I begins to cry. That was my start. I said, hey, wait a minute. This little thing can play the blues. It's all right. Now, I don't know what you did during the pandemic, but I sort of taught myself how to play the blues ukulele. And then I started listening to stuff that I had previously heard, but not really heard because I didn't take the time to learn this stuff, right? And I found out about a cat by the name of Otis Jackson. Otis Jackson recorded a song in 1946 that I love for a couple reasons. A, it's gospel. Secondly, the thing I love about this song is its history. And the other thing I love about this song is I love to do it for young people because they come to realize they didn't invent the form. What form am I talking about? Well, I'm going to tell you. Young folks, I love young folks, but young folks are very assured in what they do. It's like you ask a young person, what's the greatest movie of all time? And yet they're liable to tell you something like Titanic. What? Ask them about some other important piece of American culture. Ask them about Cain and Abel and they say, who's Cain and Abel? No, we old school. So this guy, Otis Jackson, recorded this in 1946. And a lot of young people don't get it because they don't study the history. But Otis did because he was living it. Said, well, I cried about Roosevelt, he wasn't no kid. Cried about Roosevelt, he wasn't no kid. Cried about Roosevelt, he wasn't no kid. But it was a great president till the end. Well, 1945, good president laid down and died. Knew just how all the poor people felt when received the message we lost Roosevelt. In his life there was all indications in Warm Springs, Georgia, he would seek salvation. Listen, friends, don't you rush. Elizabeth Shimano, she grabbed the brush, she dipped it in the water and began to paint. Looked like the president began to faint. Never paint a picture of him at night, but she knew that the president didn't look right. Time of day, it was 12 o'clock. They tell me that Elizabeth had to stop. Great God Almighty, she waited too late. That's why they call it the unfinished poetry. A little bit later, it was about 1:30. Has a reaper hemorrhage in the world, little muddy. Called Atlanta, Washington too, like zigzag lightning. The call went through. Call long distance and notify his wife. Dr. Gruen said died at 3:35. Great God Almighty, how the bells did tone. In less than 30 minutes, the whole world moaned. And I cried about Roosevelt, he wasn't no kid. Cried about Roosevelt, poor man's friend. Cried about Roosevelt, he wasn't no kid, but he was a great president till the end. Well, Roosevelt's administration in Congress assembled. First one appointed a Negro general. Ginger Minwano Davis, I'm trying to relate. First Negro general of the United States. After Dory Miller had shown his skill, he kept sending him to sea until he got killed. Roosevelt said, I'll back the attack. Appointed Negro captain over white and black. This qualified man was Hugh Mulzac. Racial prejudice he tried to rule out. Invited Negro leaders into the White House. Made Madam Bethune first lady of the land. And part of his will to Mr. Pretty Man. advocated the fair practice of labor to let the poor man know he was our emancipator, endorsed the inventions of George Washington Carver. Why I say he was an earthly father. He took my feet out to miry clay, and I haven't looked back at the WPA. Cried about Roosevelt, cried about Roosevelt, cried about Roosevelt. Poor man's friend, he was a great president until the end. I told you the story of Roosevelt's life. Now he's done with his grief and strife. But great God Almighty, he had a sweet wife. He'd been worried since she was a girl. Roosevelt was dead, but what become of the world? Told her sons across the sea, don't you worry about poor me, just keep on fighting for victory. Your father's gone, boys are grown, bells are toned, and the whole world moaned. And I cried about Roosevelt, cried about Roosevelt, well, no, cried about Roosevelt, poor man's friend, but he was a great president till the end. Ain't but two presidents people felt, Abraham Lincoln and Roosevelt. Way back yonder in the olden days, they tell me Abraham Lincoln, he freed the slaves. There's a pity Roosevelt cannot see old glory flying over Germany. But God Almighty knew what was best, knew that the president needed rest. His battle been fought, his victory been won. Troubles of the world have just begun. When you get triggered and you don't know what to do, call on Jesus, he's a president too. And I cried about Roosevelt, I cried about Roosevelt, cried about Roosevelt. He was a great president till the end. Have mercy, Lord. I know why those rappers, like it's 7 of them, because that's a lot of work. This I have to pass the mic off. Woo. Well, y'all know, one of the things that is great about the idea of being a storyteller, about belonging to this wonderful fraternity and sorority and family, folks are so open to encouraging you to do what it is that you need to do, to tell your story. I have a daughter, and she's 30 years old. Just had her 30th birthday. Her name is Arnesia. And Arnesia that's my girl. She's more like me than anybody in the family. And I have a son too. I mean, I love him. He's 33. He's Baptist, just like me. You can tell a Baptist, but you can't tell him much. So he's kind of like that. But my daughter, we can communicate, even right from the beginning. In the delivery room, my son was like, he was born, he was like, my daughter, they handed her to me and she went, like, uh-oh, this one's different. So her name is Arnesia, and I wanted her to know why her name is Arnesia. I was hanging around some really great songwriters, and they were, giving me some techniques, and I went on a plane, and I had a legal pad, and by the time that plane landed from Boston to Detroit, this song was about 80% written, and I was just glad that I was there when the song came down. You see, there was a time when folks felt like you had a genius. In other words, it's like the genius, the spirit, the muse would follow you around. We were talking about, Bill Harley and I were talking about this at breakfast the other day. The muse would follow you around. And your responsibility as an artist was to be able to, whatever the muse told you, put it on paper, put it in stone, put it on guitar, whatever. But then, after Descartes, I think therefore I am, you became the genius. And that's dangerous, man. That's when you start doing weird stuff. That's when you, like when you're Michael Jackson and you start getting the, Elephant Man's bones. No. I'd rather be there when it lands, and hopefully I'm there, and when it lands, I deliver it like it's supposed to be. So I wrote this song for my daughter. She's 8, when she was 8 years old, and it refers to Arnesia of Evergreen, a little town in Alabama. perpetually behind the times. They were excited 5 years ago because they got a new Walmart and a new John Travolta movie, Grease. But that's where the story starts. In the year 1916, the moneyed world had turned its hands to war. But deep within the state of Alabama, Arnesia of Evergreen was born. And there never was a movie done about her. No history book will ever hold her name. But I know her story like I know my own hand, and I will tell her story just the same. Well, in 28, when all the folks were laughing and talking about the money that they'd made, at 12 years old in dresses made of patches, Arnesia picked the cotton while she played. And she helped her mother raise 2 orphan cousins, 'cause that's the way they did it in those days. Barely older than the children that she cared for. That's how Arnesia learned her mother's ways. And in 34, when all the folks were crying and talking about the money that they'd lost, Arnesia was all alone and trying to figure out what love too young would cost. She'd had 2 children for him out of wedlock, back when such children were a mark of shame. And though she never wore it in her own house, she raised those babies with their father's name. And no movies were ever done about her. No history book will ever hold her name. But I know her story like I know my own hand, and I will tell her story just the same. In 49, Arnesia left for Detroit to see the poor man's fabled promised land. She sold whiskey to the workers in Black Bottom, and she put her problems all in Jesus' hands. And Detroit, it wasn't like old Alabama. She had to learn to face the cold gray morn. That rags wrapped round her feet would keep her walking, and newsprint round her legs would keep her warm. And in 56, while civil rights was marching, her daughter had a baby of her own. And she found out what Arnesia had long known, that it's hard to raise a baby on your own. But those women worked to raise that boy together, and they gave me all the best they had to give. When I think about the way those women raised me, I know those women taught me how to live. And no movies were ever done about her, and no history book will ever hold her name. But I know her story like I know my own hand, and I will tell her story just the same. By the 60s, Arnesia's son got married, and he found success in the mechanic's trade. And his 8 children came and brought his mama pleasure, and around her feet all 9 grandchildren played. And we grew inside the joy that was around her. Somehow we'd all cut out our middle moms for a neighborhood of children called her mother, and she wiped away our tears on callous palms. But by the 80s, while the whole wide world was spinning, Arnesia did the best that she could do. Her only son was killed at 37, and her only daughter died at 52. And the twist of fate had taken both her children, and nearly all the joy that did remain. But in my son's eyes, she met 4 generations, and she knew her life had not been lived in vain. And in 90, in the month that she was born in, Arnesia of Evergreen went home. And in 91, my wife came in and blessed me with another little Arnesia of my own. And sometime when I hear my niecey laughing, I hear my other niecey in the sound. And it's then I bow my head and pray to heaven that Arnesia's life goes better this time round. Thank you. Well, that song and a lot of the other stuff, not all of it, but a lot of the stuff that I've done are, it's recorded, and we all have CDs and stuff. Some of us have drives. We're sophisticated. And some of us have books. I don't have those, but by all means, stop by the store and take a little Robert and a little Bill and a little Bill and a little everybody home with you. We appreciate that. As Ray Charles said, every CD you buy for me benefits the blind. So I ain't blind, but everything you buy for me helps a worthy black family in Detroit. I see, maybe I got a little time for a little bit of slide. Back in the Delta, when those guys would get those cheap guitars and the strings were so high off the board that they couldn't even push them down, somebody would say, it's probably good for slide. And it'd be like, yeah. So when I was going around, people would ask me, where do you go to learn how to sing the blues? And I say, there's no place better than going to church. And they say, any church? And I say, no, not any church. There are some churches that are better for blues than others. I mean, Baptist churches, Methodists, Pentecostal. I would not go to my Episcopalian, Apostolic, or my Unitarian Universalist brothers and sisters if I wanted to learn how to play the blues. My grandmother always made sure I went to church. We would have these storefront churches. I don't think y'all got no storefront churches in Ojai. A little bit too affluent. Storefront church is a church that used to be something else. Used to be a candy store, bookstore, didn't matter what it was. They'd give it a great name like the Second Greater New Mount Moriah Zion Holiness Temple of Divine Christian Healing Prayer and Science Ministry Missionary Baptist Church Temple number 12. And you wonder how come that name is so long? Well, because we're Baptists and we can't agree on nothing. Every addition to the name represents a rift in the church. And when you walk in those old Baptist churches, those storefront churches, the first smell that hit you would be the smell of kerosene and burning wood. Old preacher trying to stoke that wood burning stove and keep it hot. You fan yourself with those tone depressive fans with the picture of the perfect black family. Father, mother, little boy, little girl wearing pigtails. With the fans donated by the Swanson Funeral Home with 2 locations of Serbia, where their motto was, our family, let our family serve your family. I guarantee you nobody wants their family to be served by the Swanson Funeral Home. When you walked up those red carpets, man, it was on the middle of the aisle. You had those red carpets donated by the Swanson Funeral Home, and sitting on the left-hand side was a big women. They were big women, they were beautiful women, but they were big women with stockings rolled up to their knees because they couldn't get them up over those great big thighs. And these were the mothers of the church. And you didn't mess around with mothers because they were the authority in the church. And they would have these little weak voices for they had lived their testimony. You know what? My girl, Whitney Houston, was never in our church. Those women would start up a song like this. They say, well, I'm going home on a morning train. Well, I'm going home on a morning train. I'm going home. Well, I'm going home, Lord. I'm going home on a morning train. We get that song may be too late. That evening train may be too late. Then you had some deacons. They was on the other side, and they had special powers. They look at you, you'd fall down for no discernible reason. The deacons sang like this. They said, I got a Bible I can read. Well, I got a Bible I can read. If I feel to read it and my soul is lost, well, it ain't nobody's fault but mine. And then you had the folks who had just lost somebody, and they'd be singing that sad song. You know that song? In the circle, the unbroken, by and by, Lord, by and by. There's a better home waiting in the sky, Lord, in the sky. And that was church. And you were doing good as long as you were in church. But then you became sophisticated. You got educated. You became an existentialist. I figure if you can't spell it, you shouldn't be it. And you know where you really go out the world backwards? When you start drinking Evian water. You know what Evian is spelled backwards? Naive. And you move away from that old church with the sisters with the stockings rolled up to their knees. But God knew you were going to do that. That's why he put a whistle on the train to bring you back in the time of darkness. And when you get in trouble, you got to listen for that whistle. Only problem is the devil got a train too, calls it the soul train. His train sound a little different. God knew that too. That's why he gave you a bell, so you can tell the difference. And when you get in trouble, you gotta listen for that whistle, listen for that bell. And you can ride it, and you can depend on it. Well, I got a Bible I can read. Oh, I got a Bible I can read. If I feel the reading and my soul is lost, ain't nobody's fault but mine. Be time for that service to wind down. Go home, take off those tight-fitting shoes, and let your toes spread. Turn on that black and white Philco television. Wait for 27 minutes for the picture to come in. And watch the Detroit Lions lose. So as that service would start to wind down, you could hear the drivers roll. Too fast, y'all. Too fast. Air brake. All aboard! All aboard!
Let's hear it from Bill Harley and Reverend Robert Jones. Yes. Two magnificent men right here.
Bill Harley!
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And before you go, you know what? We love Kim Whitecamp, and guess what? She was so in love with you that she couldn't wait to get here today, and she left all of her merchandise in her closet. So when you come tomorrow, you'll be able to buy her CDs, and they'll be on the resource table. We can't wait to see you tonight. There's music, there's stories of mystery and suspense, and of course Naughty Tales right here at 8 something. So I'll see you later. Thank you.